Today's lesson is 8th grade math out of the Blue Big Ideas book. The lesson objective today, students will use techniques to solve literal equations. The standards covered are AEE 7B. The book pages that you will use out of the hardcover book, it's pages 26 through 29, and out of your practice journal, page 20. Okay. Today we're going to be working out of lesson 4, and we're going to be working through to solve literal equations. Literal equations are an equation that has 2 or more variables. To rewrite a literal equation, you're going to solve for one of the variables in terms of the other. It's much easier for us to go through and actually practice these in order for you to understand. So the first step that we're going to do in solving an equation such as 2y plus 5x equals 6, they've asked us to solve for y. So I've changed the color just to make it a little bit easier for us. We're going to go through and actually solve for y. So our first step that we're going to do is we are going to write out the equation on our board. So I went ahead and wrote it separate so that we aren't fumbling through the 4y in there. And then our next step is we're going to remove the x's by shifting it to the opposite side. So we want to get the x's, in this case we only have one, but we want to work to get it out of the left side of the equation. So right now, we want to isolate this for now. So we have to get rid of anything that is on the same side of the equal sign as that 2y. So right now I'm seeing a plus 5x. So we're going to do the opposite. So right now it's plus 5. We're going to go ahead and go minus 5. Okay, whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Okay, and we're taking that x with it. That's why we're doing the opposite of the plus minus. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my equation so that you can see what is simplified. So we have 2y. This is canceled out. I just forgot to cross it out. Equals 6 minus 5x. Okay, now don't get confused that right now we're working with 2 variables because they're really asking us just to solve for one. Okay, and this is just working on isolating. Eventually we will be working where we will solve for both x and y, and we'll learn how to solve and then substitute in. But for right now, we're just going to solve until it says y equals. We aren't going to actually get a single digit answer. Okay, our next step is we're going to isolate y by doing our division. So just like we've done in the past, we now want to work to get this y by itself. So in order to do that, we have to remove that 2. So right now it's 2 times y. So we're separating it from the y. That means we're going to divide it away from y. So divide by 2. Now, here's the part that's a little bit different. You guys are just used to going over and there's one number on the right-hand side. Well, now we've got 2. So we're going to have to go through and we're going to have to divide each of these by 2. Now, I know if you look in the book, they would have it actually look like this. Instead of having them individually, they would write it out like this. That's a simpler way of writing it. But ultimately, they're going to ask us to reduce where we can. So that's why I choose to write it like this, so that it's just visually easier for me to see that, oh, I could reduce this down to a whole number. And this I can either leave as an improper fraction or I can change it to a decimal. So now, my final answer is going to be y equals, I can reduce this down, 6 divided by 2 would give me 3, minus, and I can either choose to write this in its decimal form or I can leave it as 5 over 2. So it would either be 2.5x, or I could have also written this as 3 minus 5 over 2x. Either of those answers are correct, and I would accept either. So you have to be comfortable interchanging between those because if it comes to a standardized test, you just have to be comfortable interchanging between fraction versus decimal. I will accept either. Okay, so your first step is you're going to want to write out your equation. That's going to be step 1. Make sure that you get it transferred correctly. Second step, you're going to remove any variable. Now, in this case, it was x's because they were asking us to solve for y. It's not always going to be that we leave for y. So that's where you have to read through your directions. Here they said to solve for y, so we wanted to isolate y. So in this case, we removed any of the x's. Okay, so then we shifted those to the other side by doing the opposite. And then we worked to isolate the variable. So we worked to get y isolated by doing that division aspect. Okay, so let's try a couple more of these. Okay, so I've written the steps up here. I've already kind of gone through them multiple times. Okay, so I'm going to pull our first question out. And we're going to solve for y in all of these. Now, eventually they may ask you to solve for different things, but for now, we're going to solve for y. So I went ahead and made y red just so that I knew that that was stop, that's going to stay. Everything else is shifting to the other side by doing the opposite. So I have a 5y minus x equals 10. Now, I need to get rid of any of the adding or subtracting that's involved. So in other words, I'm going to have to get rid of this x part. Okay, so right now it's a minus x. So the opposite of minus x is to add x. So plus, that's really a 1x. So I'm going to write 1x. That cancels out. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. But here's what you have to remember. I cannot add 10 plus 1 and get 11 because this 10 right here does not have an x. So I'm just going to write it behind here, plus 1x. The only time we get to add the digits is when they are like terms or they have the exact same ending. Okay, so now here's what I have left over. 5, and I'm going to actually change the color so that we can pay attention to that. We have a 5y equals, wow, that's a funky equals sign, equals 10 plus 1x. That's what I have sitting in there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and continue to isolate y. So we got rid of the x, or the variable that they didn't want us to leave. Now we need to isolate the y. So right now it's 5 times y. We're going to divide by 5. And over here, I'm going to divide each of these by 5. I like to write them individually so that I don't forget to simplify where I can. That's why I choose to write them individually instead of both of those numbers over just a single 5. So now when I look at this, I have y isolated equals 10 divided by 5. I can reduce to a whole number of 2 plus 1 divided by 5. I can either do the decimal or I could leave it as 1/5 x. And I will tell you, the book tends to leave it in its fraction form instead of changing it to its decimal. If you're more comfortable changing this into 0.2x, that's okay. So this would be our final answer. We're finished. We can't work any further because we don't know what x is and we don't know what y is, okay? We would have to have a second equation in order to solve that. We'll get there later this year, just not yet. Okay, so let's try another one. Shift this up in case you need to review those steps. Okay, so this one, this time they've got the y on the right side. I know you guys are often used to working from left to right. If you don't like how this is set up, you can go ahead and rewrite it. It is up to you. Some of you are comfortable and you just say, I'll just work the opposite, but I'll work to the left. And some of you get stuck on, oh, I'm so used to going left to right. That's okay. All I'm going to do, just to make it easier for those of you that maybe struggle with that, having to work from the right to left, I'm just going to flip-flop everything. Now, the key thing is when you flip-flop it, everything in this stays in that order. I'm just going to the other side of the equal sign. So I'm really flip-flopping everything here with the 12. Those are going to just switch around for now just to make it easier to look at. So I have 6x plus 3y, and I'm going to keep my y red just to make it easier for you guys to look at, equals 12. So I'm solving the equation for y. That's how I know that I'm going to leave the y and isolate the y. Okay, so now looking at this, we have to get rid of our part that's not directly attached to the y. So I see a 6x here. Okay, remember, This is positive, so the opposite would be negative 6x or minus 6x. And over here, I'm just going to write it right behind here, minus 6x. Okay, and I can't combine those because the 12 does not have an x. Okay, so now simplified, I'm just going to erase this part here. Just instead of rewriting it, I'm going to erase it because it's really gone. I canceled it out. Okay, so now what I have is I have a positive 3y equals 12 minus 6x. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to work to get y by itself now because we were isolating for y. Okay, so now we've got 3 times y, so we're going to divide. So you just have to constantly be thinking, how can I get y by itself? Divide by 3, and this is the new part because we have more than one term there. Each term gets divided by 3, and no, they don't have to have the x. That's when you add and subtract. Okay, so now when I simplify, I have y equals 12 divided by 3. That I can reduce down to 4. Then I have a minus sign, and since there's only one, I can just bring the minus sign. Had this 3 had a negative with it, then I would have to then think about, hey, there's 2 negatives, but there's only 1 negative. Now, can I do 6 divided by 3? Yes, I can reduce that down to 2, and then I'm just going to put my x on it. So y equals 4 minus 2x. Okay, if somebody's reverse those around, you would just have to make sure that that minus sign stays in front of the 2. So you could have had y equals negative 2x plus 4. I don't know why you would rewrite it, but I know that once we start getting into slope, and this is where this comes into play. You guys are going to be working with slope in chapter 2, I believe it is, and you have to isolate for y. So this is kind of getting us ready for that chapter 2. And when you work slope, it's always y equals mx plus b. And so this x portion tends to be in the front. So that's where you'd have to get comfortable with shifting, that you can't just flip-flop on the other side of the negative sign. You can flip-flop on equals, but not on the opposite side of a minus sign. Okay, so let's try another one. Set my marker down, and this one. Okay, so I'll scroll back up so you can see the directions. Okay, so we're working to get y by itself. So first step, we want to get rid of anything that is not directly attached to the y. So I see this 4x. So right now it's a positive 4x. We're going to go minus 4x to get rid of it. Okay, I'm not going to line it up directly under the 1 because the 1 doesn't have an x, so I'm just going to write right behind here, minus 4x. Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, so now on the left-hand side, I have negative 4y. Right side equals 1 minus 4x. So now we have to work to get y by itself. I have to get rid of this. How am I going to get rid of a minus 4 or a negative 4? We're going to add, we're going to have to go ahead and divide because it's directly linked here. Okay, so if it's division, I take the negative with it. It's not the opposite, but I take the negative with that 4. So divide by negative 4. This side I'm going to divide by negative 4, divide by negative 4. Okay, so now when I go through and I simplify this out, I have y left by itself equals 1 divided by 4, so I could do it as 0.25. I'm going to leave it as a fraction. So it's negative 1/4 because there was 1 negative. Now here's the tricky part. There's 2 negatives between those 2 4s. In division of integers, 2 negatives make a positive. So this becomes plus 4 divided by 4 is 1x. Okay, so we're done solving for y. Y equals negative 1/4 plus 1x. And like I said, this is going to come into play when we get into working with slope, and eventually we'll be working some equations where we will solve for both x and y, but they will always give us a second equation to be able to do that. Okay, so if you want to look at your practice book, I believe these are on page 20 of your practice journal. And if you just want to work directly out of that, you can. Otherwise, you can work them out on your whiteboard also. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more with you, and then I'm gonna bring the other two out, and I want you to run through and work to solve for y on those two, and then you'll pause your video and check back. Okay, so first of all, when I see this, not that I have to have it set up with my y on the left, but I just like how it looks. So I'm gonna take and I'm gonna reverse some stuff around. So I'm just gonna take and shift this to the other side of the equal sign and then bring my 13 to the right. So this is what I'm seeing, 1/6, and I'm solving for y. And in your book, because it's black and white, it just tells you in the direction, solve for y. I went ahead and changed the color up here. So then I still have plus 2x equals 13. Okay, so I have just rewritten that because I like to see the y on the left-hand side. You don't have to do that. Okay, so now when I go through to solve this one, and I chose to do this one with you because of the fact that it's got the 1/6 in there. So it may not be the first problem in your book, but it is one of the three there. So I'm going to work to get rid of anything that is not directly attached to the y, and that would be right here. I'm going to get rid of this plus 2 by doing minus 2x. So I can't put it underneath because 13 does not have an x, so minus 2x. Okay, so this is what I've got, 1/6 y equals 13. Oh my goodness, I've got all sorts of colors going on here. Trying to make this as easy so it doesn't look so confusing. Equals 13 minus 2x. Okay, so now here's where it's tricky, you guys. With that 1/6, you have to think back to fractions. And when we do fractions, when we divide by a fraction, because we're gonna have to divide by 1/6, we're gonna keep, we're gonna change, we're gonna flip. Okay, so I'm gonna write this out and then I'm gonna redo these. And this is the reason I chose to do this one, because it was kind of confusing with the fraction in there. So that's why I'm working through this one together. I promise the other two are not that hard. Okay, so this canceled out. So really this is what I'm seeing when I look at this. I'm gonna change my colors here. When I look at this, I am really working horizontally. This is what I see. 13, which I'm working with a fraction, over 1, divided by 1/6. So when I divide, I keep, I change. So this is going to become multiplication. And then I flip. So 13 over 1 times 6 over 1. So 13 times 6 gives me 78. So right now I've got y equals, I just got 78 for this. Now I know from looking here that it's going to end up being a negative, so I'm going to write a minus sign. And then I'm going to keep 2, which is 2 over 1. I'm not going to worry about the x right now. I'm just going to put that behind my answer. I'm going to change to multiplication, and I'm going to flip this, so 6 over 1. So I get 12 there, so minus 12, and then my x is going to go there. This is solving for y. Very confusing with that fraction, right? Promise you, if you could work through that one with me, the other two are going to be pretty easy. So I'm going to pull those two out, which they are the other two that are in your soft cover book. So if you prefer to look at page 20 in your soft cover book, you can do that also. And I'm going to shift these so that I can have them both out here at the same time. They're just the other two in your soft cover book. Okay, so you're going to work through and you're going to work to isolate for y. Okay, so you're going to solve for y. I'm going to go ahead and have you pause your video, work through these, and then you're going to come back and check your answers. I will not have the steps, so if your answers aren't right, you'll have to just kind of check with me or check with a partner on those. So go ahead and pause your video now, and then check back with me in just a minute or a few minutes to check your answers. Sorry, I flip-flopped these around. Let me rewrite this. Okay, those are the answers that you should have gotten for both of those. And I apologize, I accidentally had them reversed on my whiteboard as I had worked them, so I had them flip-flopped when I went to write them. Okay, so if you did not get those, of course, my work is not here for you to be able to check. You'll have to just kind of check in with me and maybe I can look through your work and see where you had made your mistakes. On this second one here, it could have possibly been, did you remember to reduce? So maybe check that if you're seeing bigger numbers. If you had, for example, here 12 over 10, it's just that I had reduced it down. So good luck. You'll go ahead and work through some problems out of the hardcover book that are working these same samples.